Howdy Hive Scum and welcome back. It's been a little minute since I did anything on Necromunda, mainly because obviously nothing new has come out and I feel like honestly I've touched on most subjects. And if you've watched my channel in the past, you'll know that I've pretty much covered every base in Necromunda to some extent at some point. However, there is one thing that I've been talking about since the re-release of Necromunda in 2017 that has bothered me. And I think it's something that has got worse and worse as things have come on with a little bit of power creep in this game. Now, Necromunda is an awesome game. It's my favorite game, but it is not perfect. And I think we all know this. There are lots and lots of house rules, FAQs, erratas, and many people running with their own little sandbox versions of Necromunda, which is absolutely fine. That's part of the beauty of Necromunda. It's just how customizable it can be. But one core rule that has always bothered me is the close combat mechanics. Now, I would say that the close combat mechanics currently are sitting in a place where it really is who charges first wins. If you're new to Necromunda and you use a Death Maiden, a Nachtigall, a Stimmer, a Brute, or any of the big powerful characters in Necromunda, if you get priority, you activate first, you charge, you win. It's really that simple, especially if you're using some of the very powerful Dramatis Personae and hangers-on in the game. Things have got too powerful, there are too many attacks, there are lots of 2+ weapon skill fighters with high strength and high damage output weapons, and it just becomes a case of who charges first. There's very little back and forth, and there used to be a bit more of that in Necromunda. So, what we're going to do today is discuss some of the sort of ways around this mechanic, how we can make it better and somewhat fix it for your own personal tastes. So a bit like the Avengers, a team, including myself and a bunch of very talented minds, got together and we discussed this stuff at length through the miracles of the internet. And what I've got for you today is an article from Minnowar.com. If you go and check out Minnowar.com, you can find everything about this article in here. I'm not going to go into every single detail with this, but it's all about rethinking close combat in Necromunda. So, we started by reviewing solutions that had already appeared within the Necromunda community, ideas and rules that someone had tried to develop before us. And altogether, we managed to gather several different approaches and, most importantly, test at least some of them in practice. This allowed us to confirm or dismiss many concerns that initially appeared only at the theory stage. Playtests and simulated skirmishes led to long discussions, debates, and careful weighing of arguments for and against each solution. What happened within our group turned out to be a very accurate reflection of the Necromunda community itself, a diverse community in which complex and sometimes ambiguous rules are interpreted and adapted in many different ways. Different groups expect different things from the system and place emphasis on different aspects of gameplay. And that led us to our final conclusion. Perhaps the best solution is not to point at a single correct rule, but instead to present several approaches, clearly recommending some while leaving the final choice to you, the community. Each player or gaming group can then choose the mechanic that best fits their playstyle and expectations. Now, there are 4 key guidelines that we used when sort of coming up with some of these rules and mechanics for melee or melee, depending on what you want to call it, or close combat. Should we just say close combat fixes? I think we will. Anyway, the first one is, of course, minimal disruption to the existing rules. You know, if it ain't entirely broke, don't fix it. And if you like the current rules, just use them as is. But if you just want to tweak things a little bit, that's what we did here. We didn't want to overhaul things completely. We wanted to create new mechanics for close combat in Necromunda with minimal disruption where possible, but still trying to make it good. The second thing is that we all unanimously felt like there should always be a fighting chance, meaning what I said earlier, when you sort of charge that Stimmer into a Juve, I feel like the Juve should always have a way to make a difference, not just get absolutely smushed and turned into jelly. This just makes the story making a lot more fun, and that's why we're playing Necromunda and not 40k or Kill Team. Am I right? On the flip side of that though, your close combat specialists should inspire fear, and they should still very much be a scary, scary threat in games of Necromunda. Number 4, we're trying to balance the difference between realism and fun. We want something that behaves a bit like real world physics, but obviously if you made everything just real, it would be super boring. So you've got to make things fun as well, and this is a balancing act. So let's kick things off with rule number 1. This is Combo Breaker's rule, and this is pretty much, honestly, an entire overhaul of close combat to a certain degree, with beautiful presented pages here that I'm going to bring up on the screen now. Now, the close combat sequence is a little bit different here. Number 1 is the defender declares a reaction. Number 2, you pick your weapons that you're going to use. Number 3, you determine the attack dice. Number 4, you make the hit rolls. Number 5, you resolve the hits. 6, the reaction attacks. And 7, consolidation or coup de grace. Now here's the fun part, reactions and duels. A fighter can react once per combat round when they are targeted by a fight action. Now this is the only way that you can react in a fight, and you can only do it once per phase or once per turn. When the reaction is spent and both fighters are facing each other, a duel occurs. During a duel, it's possible for the defender to neutralize some incoming attacks or even overpower the attacker entirely. Since a reaction can only be made once per round, sometimes fighters may wish to withhold from using their reaction at the first attack and save it for later. So you've got a little bit of strategy in this dueling system. Right, let's go into the close combat structure here. The defender may spend their reaction to retaliate as long as they are operational, standing and active, and have not already done so previously this round. If the attacker is within the defender's vision arc, this reaction leads to a duel, during which both fighters simultaneously strike and defend. Number 2, picking weapons is much the same as before. However, your sidearm needs to be loaded, cannot be out of ammo, of course. Number 3, you determine your attack dice. So each fighter, this is the number of the attack's characteristic that they have, plus 1 attack dice for each of the following modifiers. For charging, you get +1, and for dual weapons, of course, you get an extra +1 there as well. You then make your hit rolls. Anything that misses or is lower than your weapon skill, you take to one side, and anything that rolls a natural 6 is a critical hit, similar to other game systems from Games Workshop. After making all of your hit rolls, successful hit rolls that is, fighters alternate picking one of their successful hits and striking or defending with them, starting with the attacker. Should the fighter select a strike option, they set aside the selected hit, and when the duel ends, all of the strikes that were set aside are resolved simultaneously. Should the fighter select a defend option, the selected list is discarded, after which they choose and discard one of their opponent's hit. And those crits we mentioned earlier, those critical hits, auto wound as well. So if you're a fan of Kill Team, this is fairly similar to that mechanic. And honestly, I do actually prefer Kill Team's close combat to Necromunda. It's one of the only things I like about Kill Team. Anyway, I'm not going to go into every little detail in here. That's just a brief summary of how this works. It is the one that is the most similar to Kill Team. So if you're familiar with Kill Team, I think you probably like this one, and I think, honestly, it is better than the current Necromunda Close Combat. You can hang me for this, it's absolutely fine, but it's the one thing about Kill Team that is good, is Close Combat. It is, let's be honest. There are a few concerns with this, though. It is a little bit complex, and it is a bit more time-consuming until you actually learn how to do it in a fluid sort of manner, I suppose. But I think that just comes, you know, when learning a new set of rules, it's just one of those things. You have to practice and practice until you get it down, and then it's just, you know, immediately easy for you. It's instinctive when you learn a rule in a game. The other thing with this rule as well is there is an opportunity to get mutual kills, which seems like a feel-bad moment, really, if you charge someone and you both die. But, I mean, at least it's fun, right? Okay, let's look at rule number 2. This is a small modification or a patch, so to speak, of the current melee or close combat rules in Necromunda. The core concept in this case is that we aimed to design a solution that follows all the initial design guides for creating a new melee rule in Necromunda. The core idea is simple. Keep the current system, but change how attacks are resolved based on the fighter's attacks characteristic. We only modify the sequence of resolving hits in close combat instead of all of the attacker's hits first and then the defender hits. Now we break the close combat into alternating attack batches or sequences limited by the fighter's base attack stats. So this is how it works in a step-by-step way. Number one, a charging fighter, say, has 3 base attacks, rolls 6 attack dice in total because of charge, bonuses, dual weapons, etc. He has an attack stat of 3, so they resolve only 3 attacks first, because that is their base attack stat. In the first sequence, suppose they score 2 hits out of those 3 dice, these are immediately resolved as normal, wound rolls, save rolls, injury, etc. Then we move on to 3. The first sequence continues, but now it's the opponent's turn. So the defending fighter acts, they roll their attacks dice, egg 3 dice total, due to their gear and skills, but their base attack stat is 2. So they roll 2 of these dice. You get where we're going here? If both fighters are still standing by the end of the first sequence, sequence 2 begins, and the attacker may now resolve their remaining attacks of 3, for example. And the process continues in sequences like this. Now, to prevent low attack fighters from charging, a special rule could allow charging fighters to resolve at least 2 attacks in their first sequence, even if their attack's characteristic is 1. So that means that when a fighter gains +1 attack for charging, they may use 1 additional attack die in the first close combat sequence. In other words, their attack limit is in the first sequence is increased by 1 die, for example. Now, I think why this rule is good is because it is just a minor change to how things work. Basically, the core rules for Necromunda are the same, but instead of having a whopping, 17 attacks like, what's-his-face, Gorshiv Hammerfist can get, he gets his base attacks, which is, 4? So he's actually hitting you 4. So he's still probably going to kill you, because hitting on 2s, he's wounding you on 2s, and it's 2 damage or something with each of his weapons. So he's still going to kill you, but it just doesn't seem so ridiculous, does it? So I'm a big fan of this one. Rule number 3, and honestly, it's probably my favorite one here. This is the original Necromunda 1995 rule. If any of you oldies, greybeards out there like myself, I can't actually grow a beard, but if I did, it would be grey. You're probably going to like this one because this is just a straight rip-off of the Necromunda 95, or Old Munda, if you want to call it that rule. I think it was really good, and it's not perfect, but it's just fun. In short, the way that Old Munda used to do it is you both roll all your attack dice, and then you add a bunch of bonuses and negatives and stuff in there too. Initiative comes into play, but basically you tally up your overall close combat score, and that is who wins that combat. I quite like it. I think it's the same in Mordheim as well. And it does require a little bit of math hammer, I suppose, because you're adding stuff up. But we're mostly people in this hobby pretty good at maths generally, I would say. We're good with stats and stuff. I was terrible at maths at school, but I'm very good when it comes to wargaming, so this is easy for me. Plus, I played a hell of a lot of Necromunda in 95. But yeah, you have a close combat modifier to this total as well. Opponent fumbling. So rolling 1s and stuff as well. You've got critical hits. You've got a charging bonus. You've got, are you higher up than your opponent, which is something I absolutely love. This would make sense logically. If you're on a higher vantage point and you're striking down, you should be at an advantage for that. And likewise, you've got encumbered and things like that as well. And obviously obstacles in the way too, which we do actually have in current Necromunda, fighting through obstacles. Now, it's all good and well saying that you love the Old Munda setup, but you may as well just play Old Munda in general, because the problem with using this with current Necromunda is if you implement these rules as is, you then just have to go through the entire weapons list and actually change how a lot of the weapons work, unfortunately, because there are traits and things in there that do not work with this system quite so well. I'm not going to get into it in too much detail, but if you played Old Munda and you played New Munda, you know what I'm talking about. It's just not really compatible, so it's got to be one or the other, really. Rule number 4 is also inspired by Kill Team, in fact, and you can see there's a theme here. We like Kill Team's close combat mechanics. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Kill Team does do close combat very well. Now, the core concept here is that this system simulates a more dynamic and reactive close combat exchange inspired by real-time duels. Here's a step-by-step example. Number 1, both fighters roll their attack dice simultaneously, applying their weapon skill to determine hits as normal. Then the charging fighter acts first, choosing one of their hits. They can either strike, resolve the hit immediately by testing against the defender's toughness, armor saves, rolls, etc., or defend. Cancel one of the defender's hits by discarding it. Exactly the same as Kill Team. Then, number 4, if the defender survives the attack, they now choose one of their own hits to either go through as a strike or defend. Number 5, this alternating exchange continues until one fighter runs out of hit dice. Any remaining hits from one side are resolved normally. For example, the defender with 2 hits left after the exchange uses both to strike the attacker. And again, like Kill Team, you could throw in an additional critical hit thing here with rolls of 6, for example, or even fumbles on 1 as well, but you're adding more complexity to something that is already quite complex, so maybe don't. Now, we know this is good. We know it works in Kill Team, and we know that unanimously people seem to like the whole close combat mechanic around Kill Team. There are some concerns though. Charging with low skill fighters becomes quite risky. That's the first one. And this also may push the meta towards high damage weapons only, I suppose. And I don't like using the word meta with Necromunda because it's not something that should be in the game. But unfortunately, there are people that play Necromunda like that. So bear that in mind. Number 5. This is rule number 5. This is the initiative-based combat. Now, I've always felt like the initiative stat in Necromunda doesn't do that much. It's one of those stats that is fairly inactive. It works with certain skills like Spring Up. It obviously, it comes into play when you're falling off stuff. And in a number of cases, initiative is used for, flash grenades, things like that as well. But I feel like initiative should do more in Necromunda, and it used to. It certainly used to. It used to be involved in close combat. Now, this is based on the system that aims to simulate the importance of agility and speed in close combat duels. And this should be a thing, honestly. Simultaneous attack rolls. Both fighters roll their attack dice at the same time using their weapon skill to determine which rolls are hits. Then you have an initiative adjustment. So each fighter then subtracts their initiative value from each successful roll to a minimum of 0. For example, a fighter with initiative 2+ subtracts 2 from each of their hit die. The charging fighter receives a +2 bonus to this result. In case of any ties, the active charging fighter wins. And then you resolve attacks in sequence. Now, what works well for this is it gives initiative a more meaningful role in Necromunda when I feel that it doesn't currently have much of a role. But of course, charging with low initiative fighters becomes more risky. Now, one thing that is cool about Necromunda is generally the fighters with the higher initiative are the Juves. So that's kind of cool. Juves would be better in close combat, I suppose. But does that make sense logically compared to a big stimmer? I think not. Also, the parry skill and parry trait on swords and stuff becomes a bit of a problem here as well because it just makes things so much more influenced by parry, basically, and the pushing down of your enemy's results. Rule number 6 we have here is a initiative-based dodge system. A little bit different here. The core concept behind this one is that this mechanic builds upon rule number 2, adding an additional layer that allows fighters to dodge attacks using their initiative. Similar to rule number 5, initiative becomes a much more meaningful stat during melee. In short, dice from a fighter's pool can now be used not only for attacks, as in rule number 2, but also for dodges, which require a successful initiative test. Everything follows the process from rule number 2, with the following adjustments. You have attack pools, so both fighters roll their attack dice at once to determine how many hits, successes they score. These hits are forming their attack pool. You then have charge bonus, so the charging fighter has an attack characteristic of 2, for example. Because of the charge, they can now make 1 extra strike in the first exchange, so in this case 3 attacks total. The dodging new mechanic that you throw into here, though, the defending fighter may choose to spend some dice of their own pool to attempt dodges. They can use up to as many dice for dodging as their attacks characteristic allows, and you've got to pass an initiative test to be a successful dodge. What works about this one is that it gives real value to the initiative stat, similar to the last rule there, and it also just adds a bit more tactical depth generally, meaning that you've got different options that you can do in a fight. And I think dodging is a really cool idea as well, just being able to dodge out of the way. It makes things very kung fu-like. However, this could make things last a bit longer and again just be a little overly complex. And it may lead to pre-charge calculations where players look at their attack pools before even committing to the charge and hesitate over even doing so. Rule number 7 hasn't got a name as such, but the key sort of principle here is that we are limiting the number of attacks per turn, keeping almost all of the rules without modifications, keeping it simple, maintaining the system's logic and utilizing existing mechanics, and the attacker's number of attacks is influenced by the defender model's attacks characteristic. I'm not going to go into this one in too much detail, but essentially what this means is that you subtract the defender's amount of attacks from your amount of attacks when charging. So there's just less dice involved. It's a lot more simple. Is it as fun though? Probably not, but it certainly does make things more simple and more fluid. Rule number 8 goes into further stuff on limiting the number of attacks generally. The core concept here is that another idea worth considering is drastically simplifying close combat by reducing the number of attacks in the game overall. In such a system, the number of strikes a fighter can make would equal their attack's characteristic. A regular ganger would strike once, a champion twice, and only the most legendary close combat fighters would reach 3 strikes. All other bonuses, such as extra weapons, combat drugs, special rules, or traits like the paired trait, would either need to work differently or possibly be removed entirely. This could make melee combat more balanced, more interesting, and easier to follow. Anyway, food for thought there, but 8 different rules that we came up with as a team of Avengers in the Necromunda community. I hope this was insightful for you guys. And again, I don't want to explain absolutely everything for you, or as my missus says, mansplain. She loves saying that one. But please do go and look at the article. This is on minnowar.com, Minnowar. Go check it out. This was written beautifully, and the guys that did this with me as well are super, super talented and know a lot more about the game than I do as well. I'm just the voice on the end of this for this article. But I think, like I've been saying for a very long time now, Necromunda really does need either a rules overhaul at some point, which I do think we're going to get. I do think we're going to get a new box set at some point soon, and hopefully they look at the close combat mechanic and perhaps mix it with Horus Heresy, Kill Team, Warcry, stuff like that, where I think it does a better job of close combat generally. I just brought up Horus Heresy there because I think the dueling mechanics in Horus Heresy would be a really, really cool thing to throw into Necromunda, if a little bit complex, but so damn cool. Go play Horus Heresy. Anyway, it's been a pleasure giving you more Necromunda content. I'm sorry I haven't been able to deliver much of this, but I haven't had much in the way of sustenance from Games Workshop in terms of Necromunda, obviously, because we just haven't had any new releases. So as and when we do, I'm sure I'll be covering it. And no, don't start thinking that I'm going to abandon Necromunda anytime soon, or ever for that fact. I'm always going to be making Necromunda content, but I am really enjoying doing painting content, particularly painting Space Marines at the moment, which I know some of you probably go, oh no, not Damon, he's fallen to the dark side, he's painting Space Marines. If you like me and you like my channel, please support all of the stuff that I do, because it means a huge amount to me that you like my painting stuff as well as my Necromunda stuff. I'm just throwing that out there. It would be really great if you support all of the stuff that I do, because I do it all with passion and gusto, and it's all from the heart, and it's all for you. It's not for me, okay? Anyway, that's it for now. I'll be back with another video real soon. Peace out.